At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce our Commissioner, Johnathan J. Smith. Commissioner, please go ahead.
But thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And we really appreciate you all taking time to join us as we celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Nearly 2 million New Yorkers and over 22 million people across the country identify as with either Asian American or Pacific Islander descent. And we know that AAPI individuals have made both our state and our country a better and more vibrant place for all of us to live. We know that AAPI individuals are our neighbors, they're our coworkers, they're our friends, and they are part of the New York State family. We also know, unfortunately, that this past year has been one of great challenge and stress for many in the AAPI community. We have all seen, and some of us may have even directly experienced, some of the acts of hatred, bigotry, and bias directed towards the AAPI community. And unfortunately, we also know that there has been a long history of bias and discrimination directed towards the AAPI community, going back to the Chinese Exclusion Act, to the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, to the suspicion and violence directed towards Muslim and South Asian communities in the years after 9/11, and most recently, this rising pattern of harassment and violence directed towards those of AAPI descent, and particularly those who are women and seniors within those communities. And so while we know that this is a period of challenge, we also know that there is much to celebrate during this AAPI Heritage Month. And we also want to make clear that here in New York State, we stand firmly against bias, hatred, and those who seek to divide us. Across state government, we have launched a number of new resources to address the rising tide of anti-AAPI bias, which can be found online at ny.gov/stopasianhate. We're also working and dedicated to make sure that state services across the array of our agencies are available in a broader array of languages for New Yorkers. And we are willing to do all that we can to make sure we are making our resources and our services available to the AAPI community. And later on in this discussion, I'm thrilled to be joined by my colleagues in state government who will talk about the array of resources that they have available and ways that we are committed to working with the AAPI community, not just this month, but going forward. We also will have an opportunity during this session today to hear from you, members of the New York State community and members of the AAPI communities, about what we can do in New York to provide better assistance and support to you all, again, not just during this time, but more broadly. I am also thrilled to say that we also will be joined in this discussion this evening by 3 members of the governor's cabinet who identify as members of the AAPI community to share with us their viewpoints and their reflections during this time. So just so we're all clear about the run of show, we'll start with the discussion with those AAPI cabinet members. We'll then lead into a broader town hall discussion, and you're encouraged to write any comments into the comment function. And then we'll hear from, at the conclusion, from other state agencies about the resources that they're available. With that, I now have the pleasure of introducing our guest speakers. First is Philip Ng, who is the president of the Long Island Railroad. Phil, like myself, is a native Long Islander, and he first joined the MTA as Chief Operating Officer in 2017. We're also joined by Lily Fan, who is a commissioner of the State Liquor Authority. Lily is a graduate of both Yale University and Yale Law School, and has worked as a theatrical and documentary film producer. And finally, we're also joined by Gail Quiniones, who serves as the president and CEO of the New York Power Authority, a role he has occupied for more than a decade. And previously, Gail has served NYPA both during the Patterson and Spitzer administrations, as well as helping to lead former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg's energy policy efforts. I'm thrilled to have Phil, Lily, and Gil with us this evening. I wanted to start this conversation with you, Lily. A question for all of you, but I'll start with you, Lily. We know that the AAPI community is a growing segment of both the American and New York State population. We also know that increasingly we see increased activity in the AAPI community in terms of political engagement, community engagement, and other forms of civic engagement. All of you are leaders in the state and in your communities. I was hoping you could share with us, about what it is that we could do as a state, as a community, to help the AAPI community to make sure that they take advantage of all of the political and civic engagement and activism that is available to them. So Lily, I'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. This is a little bit awkward, so I feel like I'm talking to myself. But anyway, I feel like for me, in order to help others break the barriers, it's important for me to show up. Also, I think as a community, we need to acknowledge that 25% of Asian Americans in the state of New York are living in poverty. And so in order for us to rise up as a group, we need to pick up from all those who are really vulnerable and really suffering and try to help them really live a true American experience so that they can also engage in community properly and really, be part of the system, so that if we organize as a group, then we can get more access, we can get more data, we can become a line item, so to speak. And that's a really important thing in my mind.
Great, thanks, Lily. I'll ask the same question to you, Phil.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. And so throughout my whole career, I've been blessed to not only be in public service, but blessed to be able to have opportunities to be in positions of leading. And I always remind everyone that you could be a leader at every level of your employment. And what I'd like to do, as Commissioner Fahn said, is to lead by example and really to try and demonstrate not only what I'm doing as the president of Long Island Railroad, but what a lot of our workforce, particularly the AAPI workforce, are doing to support and contribute to the quality of life that we all enjoy in New York and on Long Island. And by leading by example and demonstrating how we are part of the community, I think is a great way to then engage with the groups and to create goals within an agency, and not just create the goals, but then work hard to meet goals, create mentoring programs, and really promote the diversity and support those that are embracing it, and continue to, as you said earlier, Commissioner Smith, stand united against any hate and bias, and then really just keep supporting one another.
Great, thank you. And finally, I guess, Gil, the same question to you. You've broken so many barriers through your career. What can we do to help more members of the AAPI community continue to break these barriers?
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and thank you for having us this afternoon. Lily, Phil, and I are really the exception rather than the rule. Let me tell you some statistics. The share of Asian American women at senior levels is 39% lower than at entry level positions. Asian American men experience an even steeper drop, with 64% less representation at senior levels compared with entry level positions. So as Phil said, I believe that measures that we can take, not just for Asian Americans, but for our minority and diverse employees, include the following. Number one, we need to recognize and diagnose representation challenges along the promotion pipeline in public service and in the corporate world, especially with the Asian community. You know, the subdivisions of Asian Americans need to be looked into as well because of the historical immigration trends and the cultural differences of the subgroups within the AAPI community. Number two, and these are things we're doing at the New York Power Authority, how do we mitigate implicit bias and implicit and unconscious bias during promotion and performance reviews of our employees? And again, that applies both in the public sector and in the private sector. And for Asian American leaders and allies alike, you know, foster sponsorship and mentorship for lower tenure Asian American employees. And of course, across the board, expand workplace flexibility and support. So those are the kind of things that we're doing at the New York Power Authority. We believe it, you know, we hope that other public agencies and private corporations follow.
Thank you. And I think, you know, one thing that I think is consistent across what all three of you said was, you know, a few things actually. First, you know, a recognition that the AAPI community, like any community, isn't a monolith, right? That there are differences in terms of backgrounds, that there are differences in terms of socioeconomic status, that there are differences in terms of access to power and you know, elevation and promotion, and those are all key challenges, right? And recognizing that you can't have a one-size-fits-all to this community, just like you can't have it to any other community or any other group of people. You know, the other thing too that I think, you know, really you know, resonated with me based on what you all said, and something, you know, I think we see a lot in the media right now, is that, you know, many people of the AAPI community right now feel sometimes that their, you know, concerns or issues are invisible to decision makers. I think, you know, we see this in the context of, you know, perhaps hate crime reporting or response. But, you know, I think really picking up on what you said, Gil, it's not just limited to that, right? That these same issues can occur in the employment context, they can occur in other places as well. And I wonder, you know, both because all of you are members of the AAPI community, but also leaders of organizations and, you know, decision makers yourselves, you know, what can we be doing, you know, both within our organizations and agencies, but also more broadly, you know, as New Yorkers, to help respond to this feeling of invisibility that, you know, so many of the AAPI community are experiencing. And I'll open up that to any of you who want to maybe jump in there.
Well, I'll start, Commissioner Smith. You know, the importance of being able to help folks that are feeling the inability to be more out there and be more embraced and more welcome is something that we, I think, all are looking to continually support and work towards in terms of ensuring that the communication lines are open. And that we're not just listening to the folks, but we're also responding and acting on when we communicate with them. And I think it's important that as we find successes with those dialogues and be able to support the various groups, those small wins can lead to bigger wins. And it's a matter of putting staff of all races in positions to succeed, because each of those demonstrate the ability for us to step out into the limelight, to step out perhaps sometimes when you're not comfortable, but to know that you can be strong, that you would be supported. And that's important that I find for all of the staff. Know that they have my support, that they can do and be bold and think outside the box. And then really just to make sure that open lines of communication to constantly be supporting and participating as we're doing here today.
Yeah, and I will add to that by just saying that I think the invisibility I think the first step actually has to come from the Asian American community ourselves. I think we have to step up and become more visible. I think that we are, culturally, like, we often show up, but then we don't speak up. We show up to do our jobs and we stay quiet and we go home, and sometimes we just deliver the work product, but don't really gain anything in sort of the humanity and sort of the relationship. And I think that's something that we can all work on. And then, more broadly speaking, is I think that, like, visibility, like, if we change the curriculum, like, if John Liu's bill gets passed and the Asian American history is actually taught in schools, then non-AAPI people can appreciate our experience and our history and have more understanding of, how we react to situations. So those are the two big things. And then, of course, the voting, but as everybody's mentioning, it's very tedious and messy to organize 49 different Asian countries and their immigrants that come into this country, and they all have different needs. We all have language barriers. And so I think that, going from 7 to 10 languages is great, for the state to do that. But, it's just Asian, we're talking about 49 different languages. So how do we, we're always going to be sort of chasing that. But, I think the Asian American movement is still young. Really, the Asian American leaders started organizing in the 70s. So, we're only 30 years in. I think that, we're going to be doing really great things if you're talking about 30 years from now. So, it's definitely going up. So.
Yeah, and if I could add, you mentioned it at your introduction, Commissioner, that Asian Americans, the AAPI community is about almost 23 million American citizens here and growing. It's the fastest growing ethnic group in the US. Yet, we are still the major ethnic group people know the least about, right? There was an article in the Boston Globe 3 days ago. There was a survey of almost 3,000 Americans. It was a representative sample, plus and minus to margin of error. And they were asked to name a famous Asian American that you don't know, that you know, Asian American, name a famous Asian American you know. And the answer, was Chan and Bruce Lee, right? Jackie Chan is not even American, and Bruce Lee's dead 50 years ago. It's unbelievable because you have Vice President Kamala Harris is partly, she's Asian American. Andrew Yang is running for mayor here in New York City, and Sanjay Gupta we see almost every day on CNN. So as Lily said, Asian Americans, need to step up because we're always known to try and assimilate. In fact, our families probably taught us, stay under the radar, assimilate, don't rock the boat. And that game plan has not worked for Asian Americans. So Asian Americans need to be more engaged, need to be more active in the political process and in the advocacy process, and to find the unifying thread among the various Asian American groups.
Oh, I think that's a really important point. And one thing that maybe a silver lining to the current moment we're in that obviously there's been horrific attacks on the AAPI community, but in turn there's also been increased media attention to that community. And I think a silver lining might be to Gil's point, to Lily's point, that's a way for the AAPI community to have opportunities to maybe come forward and engage in ways that maybe hasn't happened before, but it's also a way for the broader New Yorker or American community to get to know our community and get to understand some of the the complexities, the complications, the diversity of that community. And to Gil's point, hopefully that people realize that, there are AAPI people that you see, that you interact with. It's not just Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan, that there are people you see, but maybe those people, you see them, but at the same token, you don't really see them. And so having a way to make that more visible is, I think, important. And, when there is media attention, where there is public attention to a community, I think oftentimes you really see that kind of shifted public understanding of communities as well. So, that, may be some, if any good comes from this moment, it may be in service of those goals. I do want to remind individuals, to put in any questions or comments into the chat function or the Q&A function. If you have any questions for our panelists, we're happy to hear them. Or if you have broader statements or comments, we're about to get to our kind of community discussion forum part of our conversation today. But before doing that, one other question I have for the three of you is, I think so often, speaking of the hate crimes and the bias incidents, one thing many people ask in this moment is, what can I do, right? How can I be a good ally? How can I be a good partner to the AAPI community in this moment? And I would be curious, if you all have recommendations or thoughts, or even if there are things that people should not do, right? That sometimes, may be well-intentioned, but may not actually be effective. So, what would be helpful in this moment for the AAPI community based on your own individual kind of reflections and experiences?
Well, it is time to step up and to speak up. This is, and not only for Asian Americans, but for Americans in general. This is a moment of reckoning. To really create an equitable society, we have to see Asian Americans who they really are, Americans, and not foreigners in their home. And, we need to learn, Lily mentioned, we need to learn the history of Asian Americans, all of us, better. For Asian Americans, we need to be more engaged in our communities, whether that's a community board or nonprofits. We need to vote. We need to be more engaged in the various channels that are available to us. That's what needs to happen. And it needs to happen fast. But in terms of the violence, we need to speak up. Again, the time of, flying under the radar and not causing, kind of a little bit of uncomfortableness. Asian Americans, we don't even want to go to good trouble. We avoid good trouble. Well, I don't think we should. I think we got to step up and go and face and seek and initiate good trouble.
Yeah, I would agree with that and add to that, because while the crimes are shocking, I think I was more heartbroken and more shocked by the lack of assistance. And, there's been a couple incidents where we see people just standing there and not helping. And you hear testimony of victims saying, I was on the train and there were lots of people and no one helped me. And so, yeah, it's just, for New Yorkers, it's show solidarity, show the compassion, and don't see us as the other, right? If you are sure that that person is a foreigner, maybe you will not step up, but really we are one of you. And, but I think that there's also work that, again, I'm always thinking about what I can do and what my community can do. And so maybe it's worthwhile for us to try to cleanse the scar that we have from the history and not think so much about what we're not. I think when, after World War II, when they were putting the Japanese in the camps, every Asian person was very focused on proving that they were not Japanese, So I think that divide has really, really hurt us. And it really takes time for us to come together and really clean that out and really, solidly support each other. And then we can really organize and support other groups and then stand together and really, figure out, what is equitable. So, you know, there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work to be done from all sides. And, you know, the $10 million that Governor Cuomo had put in this budget, you know, to help us, I think that's a really great start. And I really, really hope we make the best use out of that. And there are a lot of foundations. There are all these new organizations popping up. You know, people are talking about raising $300 million, you know, for this purpose. And you know, I'm excited for the movement to continue forward.
So right, Lily, stand up and take advantage of the resources that are being provided. You know, earlier Gil mentioned something about the upbringing that we have, and I kind of relate to that. You know, my parents had worked so hard their lives, and I remember all they would do is do their work and demonstrate their strength through their actions, really. And it's sort of with me too. I'm actually a very quiet person. But I've learned in my two recent roles, the one prior at New York State DOT and now at MTA, that I do need to be much more vocal, and I need to be much more involved with the AAPI community. Every day when I'm on the trains, customers come up to me and talk to me, but a lot of AAPI community come up to talk to me as well. And I remember feeling the pride when they would come up and they'd say, you know, can I take a picture with you? We're so proud that you are president of the railroad. And I can't thank this administration enough for giving me this opportunity to be a voice of the API community. And it's important for me and others to really step up and stand up and work together, show strength through diversity, supporting all different races and showing that it's the common courtesy, it's really just being respectful of one another. And that could be very contagious. And there could be so many ways to be strong. And as leaders, it's important that we do that. And myself, as I said, I'm usually a very quiet person, but I've been really engaging more and more. And I really thank the opportunity to do that.
No, thank you all. And Phil, to your last comment, I mean, I think one thing that we've seen across all communities, and I say this, you know, as African American, is that representation matters, right? It matters when you see people who look like you in roles of authority, you know, on television, just in positions of power. And so, yes, I think, you know, what you said is really key about making sure, right, that, you know, when, you know, AAPI individuals, you know, whether they be, you know, immigrants who are new to this country or to their state, or people, you know, who have been here for generations, it's important for all of them, right, to see that there are pathways to success, to upward mobility, and that, to your point as well, that, you know, the hard work that people put in will be recognized by others and will receive, you know, the credit that it deserves. I think at this point we have actually maybe a couple of questions from the audience to all of you. And so I clearly don't know anything about technology, as the beginning of this program made clear, but I'm hopeful that through the magic of Zoom, we'll be able to open up people's mics to ask some questions. And so if you do have a question, I think if you've noted that in the chat, I think your mic should be open now to ask a question, you know, to our guest panel right now.
Thank you. My name is Arthi. I work actually for the New York Power Authority. I can't tell you, first of all, how much it means that all of you are speaking up for the AAPI community and you're in positions of leadership. And I cry once a year, so this is a big deal. But you know, it's got to be hard for all of you individually too, because you're leading companies and you're also going through this just like we are individually. How do you keep going? And how do you deal with, I mean, you've paved the way for us, right? In our generation. How did you get through it? How, you know, how do you get through it every day? And how do you communicate to your coworkers? How do you communicate to your peers? How do you still have that strength and leadership?
You know, from my personal perspective, I actually thrive on the successes of the staff and successes of others. In fact, I always say that my success is not because of me, it's because of others. But what I look to do is to empower them, support them, and to make sure that I'm putting them in a position to succeed. And no matter how tough the challenges have been, when we succeed together, it is really those types of moments that really hit home. And you see the hard work of others lead to successes. So it's really rewarding. There are days where you do wonder, how did you get into this spot? And then everyone pulls together and we really come out of it. And it really is the strength of the team, the workforce, and the diversity that we have. And it's the diversity of the environment we live in too. That's what makes it so exciting, that we have so many different cultures and we do come from different backgrounds, and we all work together so well. So that's what drives me.
I would say that for me, my job, I am not often only the non-white person. I'm also the only woman. And so I actually find that perhaps more challenging than being an Asian person. And so I really, really have to put my foot down. Luckily, at my full board, I always vote first, so I always get to speak first, and that helps. I have to prove that I have the judgment, and I have to really spend time doing my homework. In the end, it's I put my time in and I do the work, and I'm prepared. I'm more prepared than others. I try to. And then the other thing that I try to do as far as leadership is I try to show humanity at my agency. I have a part-time role, so I don't really make any decisions, but I feel like it's my job to make sure everybody is okay. So throughout the pandemic, I try to check in with executives. I do what I can to be that person that people can go talk to. I mean, in the end, it's like you want to be an ally to your staff and, to be the person that people feel like they can trust you to come to you when there is a problem. So yeah, so it's judgment, humanity. Those are the two things that I thrive on.
And Arthi, thank you for joining us. You know me and you know us very well at NIPA. And really, we're blessed. We have a great team at NIPA, and that's kind of what propels me to be able to do my job day in and day out. But as Lily said, it's preparation, it's hard work, and along the way, as what Phil said, people who give us opportunities help us to be in this position. In my case, all the way back to Mayor Michael Bloomberg, when he asked me to join his administration to help the rebuilding of New York City right after 9/11. And then Governor Spitzer, Patterson, and now Governor Cuomo in my time at the New York Power Authority. So it's hard work, really, really hard work. It's preparation. And along the way, make sure mentorship and sponsorship are also important. And of course, you have to produce, right? You have to perform, you have to produce. But to me, what sustains me at the New York Power Authority is our employees, our team. We have a great team.
Thank you, and thank you, Arthi, for that question. And I would say too, I think one of the things you mentioned in your question was sometimes the difficulty of dealing with events that are happening in the world, in your professional life or in other places. And I know for myself, and I suspect it's true for Phil, Lily, and Gil, one of the things that I think really is important of having diversity in leadership and in positions of authority is that not just the visual representation that we talked about before, which is important, but also the fact that there are people in those positions who recognize the challenges that may exist for people. And I think simply by having people, in positions of power who are members of the AAPI community, who are racial minorities, people of color, who are women, that by itself just opens up for a different perspective, a different decision-making process, which is, I think, critically important and leads to more inclusive organizations and places where people of all backgrounds can feel seen and also can feel represented throughout, even in the workplace. I believe we now have a second question from the audience.
Hi, I'm Amy Carter with the New York Power Authority, and I'm really glad to see that all this is not the situation, but I'm glad to see everyone coming together and trying to come to some resolution with it. But I am a member of an underrepresented group. I'm mixed race, I'm Black, I'm white, and it's just there are definitely resources out there that my groups that I identify with, we've been doing for years. I grew up in a household where we were always just very active and everything, but I feel like we have established also groups, organizations, and ways to work through this. And I feel like it's a great opportunity for some of the other groups that we do have, whether you're Black or anything else, if you've already been doing this, let's get the AAPI group involved. Let's take them under, whatever wing. It's just, and I'm saying wing, they can still do what they need to do. I feel like our situations are a little different, and how we got here were different. Everyone got here, but we're still dealing with a lot of issues with hate crimes, especially with the hate crimes, that we can start to advocate, not just for our siloed community. It's not, this is the Black community and that's all they do. And this is the AAPI community and this is all they do. I'm like, we can go and help out each other. We already have folks rally together for this. We have too much in common to just let others do this on their own. We're dealing generally with the same kind of issues, and we can really be an ally to other groups, and not to exclude any Caucasian groups. Anyone can participate and help out when they see something's wrong. So I don't want to take up too much extra time, so I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you, Amy. And I do think that's a really, first, kudos to NYPA for such representation, but also I think that's a really important point that, part of this, and I think it really goes back to something that Lily said before about, part of this is the AAPI community and needs to be maybe, step up in roles, but also, one thing that may help with that process is, recognizing where there are points of connection or intersectionality between other communities, right, that have experienced maybe different issues or situations, but similar patterns of marginalization or victimization or tragedy or trauma, and finding ways to work together, across communities, whether that's by race, whether that's by class, whether that's by gender, or whatever the category may be, finding those places to work together. And to recognize that, the saying is true, that often what, we have in common is much greater than what, we don't have or what keeps us separate. I don't know if any of you have any comments to Amy's, really good question.
I think Amy really hit it on the head as far as having the different groups participate and work together. And it's not necessarily, as she said, under one wing or not. But I think what is so encouraging to me, despite all the challenges and the things that are really horrific to hear and see, is when you see people stand up, you see the diversity in those groups, right? It's not just one group alone, but they're together with a whole mix of different races supporting one another. And I think that goes to the importance of each individually, but showing there's unity. And that unity, I think, has to continue to win over and be stronger. And that's, the contagiousness of that, of being a part of what makes New York so great.
And I promise I did not give like an extra vacation to NYPA employees to attend this town hall. meeting tonight. Amy and Arti are both just great employees at NYPA. But I agree, the basic idea and principle of what New York is beautiful, right? This is the gorgeous mosaic, where everyone came to. And there is that invisible thread that connects all of us as New Yorkers. And despite, as Phil said, the challenges that we have now, I think New York can stand as an example of how this can work and how actually it should work. And so I'm optimistic that despite the challenges we have, I can see New York leading and showing the way on how we can live together in harmony. We can help each other, where it's in the workplace or our community, especially now in the post-pandemic rebuilding and renewing and reimagining of New York. We need to work together if we want our communities to bounce back.
Yeah, and I think that we have to take advantage of the momentum right now. I mean, I think that with the race conversations that have risen from during the pandemic, that has, hit out, that has, started before, but has really, continued throughout the pandemic. I think a lot of those dynamics end up being a Black-white conversation. And it's a very slippery slope that I think there are in some areas of industries, like in theater or in film. I think there are Asian American participants that are already feeling like they're third-class citizen. And so how do we avoid that and make sure we build on the energy that we have and push it to a positive way, continuing to change the curriculum, continuing to bring ourselves out of poverty, continuing to, achieve on education front and on, professional front, and all of those things working together. Someone has a question in the chat about education. And I think that, certainly, having prestigious degrees it's my privilege and perhaps privilege of the other panelists here, but I will say that I actually don't think being involved in being vocal requires education. There are actually so many people that work in politics that didn't go to a fancy university or don't have a fancy degree.
여러 가지
And so that is
많은 정치인들 중에서도
Hi, Angie. Anyway, you get what I'm saying.
No, thank you. Sorry about that. I think there was maybe an issue with the interpretation. But I think that's a really important point about the fact that, all of us can engage in different ways. And to that point, it's actually a perfect segue to the next part of our conversation. First, I want to thank you, Lily, Phil, Gail, for everything you said and for everything that you've done, both in the context of this discussion, but also in your careers, and for being such great role models for the AAPI community. I learned a lot in this conversation, and also as was said repeatedly, the work that you all do goes far beyond your individual agencies or authorities, but really is, I think, a great example for what and hopefully blazing a trail for others to follow after you and continue to increase the diversity and the talent across all of our institutions, whether they be government or not. One of the things that I think is also really exciting is that we also have over a dozen state agencies that have joined us this afternoon, this evening, to say that AAPI Heritage Month matters to them, it matters to their agencies, and they're going to very quickly just introduce themselves their agencies to you all. And because our program tonight is almost over, we do each of these agencies has agreed to make themselves available next week to talk further with you or with others in your communities or families about their services and how they could be of benefit to you. And so we will be sending out additional information after this program concludes, but we did just want to take an opportunity right now to introduce the state agencies and to have them talk just at a very high, brief level about what they do and how they can be of benefit. And so I believe we're going to start with a representative from the New York State Department of Financial Services, and then we'll go on to other agencies after that. So Linda?
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Thank you, Ron, and the entire DHR team for this opportunity to join you tonight during Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. As the Commissioner said, I am Linda Sun, and I have the honor of serving as the Deputy Superintendent for Intergovernmental Affairs and the Chief Diversity Officer for the Department of Financial Services, DFS. DFS recognizes that supporting and empowering New York's AAPI communities, includes having programs that assist individuals and small businesses, which are the backbone of New York's economy, as well as protecting consumers from unscrupulous practices. Some of the services that we offer include contributing to empowering AAPI communities by providing financial literacy programs that target student loans, mortgages, banking, and elder financial exploitation. In addition, we work with local community partners to bring greater banking services to our AAPI communities through our Banking Development District program. For more information about our work, we invite you to visit our website at www.dfs.ny.gov. As the Commissioner said, please be sure to join us back next Wednesday on May 19th to hear more about our services and programs. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Owen Gilbo. I have the pleasure of being a diversity and inclusion specialist with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion Management, which is within the Department of Civil Service. Our office works hard to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion in all employment practices. The Department of Civil Service is the central personnel agency for the executive branch, serving state government employees as well as local government employees. And our services encompass all aspects of human resources, including staffing, examination processes, benefits, health insurance benefits for former and current state and local employees. The Office of Diversity and Inclusion Management works with all agencies under executive control to work on diversity and equity, diversity and inclusion plans and strategies to ensure a diverse workforce. Please join us on Friday on May 21st for the lunchtime listening session and bring any questions you may have for civil service there. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to participate. I'm Wilma Alvarado-Little, Associate Commissioner, Department for the New York State Department of Health, and I'm also the Director of the Office of Minority Health and Health Disparities Prevention. I'll also mention my DOH colleague who is not able to join us today, but will join us next week. That's Dr. Jennifer Lee, Assistant Director of the Bureau of Community Chronic Disease Prevention. And we've been involved with the Vaccine Equity Task Force, which involves a dynamic group of community, policy, and health experts to ensure equitable distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine by engaging with communities directly. The Office of Minority Health infuses health literacy, language access, cultural competence, racial and health equity awareness within our efforts. We work across the department's programs to advance and support policies and programs to promote high quality, accessible, and culturally and linguistically appropriate care for all New Yorkers. We partner with public and private agencies, community-based organizations, and communities in general in order to identify and realize opportunities towards eliminating health disparities and achieving health equity. I look forward to sharing more information with you next week. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate.
Hello, my name is Jeanette Lazelle, and I'm the Associate Commissioner for Worker Protection at the New York State Department of Labor. I'm thrilled to be part of this town hall event and look forward to our dialogue during the lunchtime series next week. I'll be sharing information on the Department of Labor's services that would be of interest to the AAPI communities in New York State. Very briefly, I look forward to discussing the services available through the Division of Immigrant Policies and Affairs, the Unemployment Insurance Claimant Advocate Office, and I will share an update on the Unprecedented Excluded Worker Fund. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for having me with you tonight. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm Vilda Vera Mayuga. I am Deputy Secretary of State for Economic Opportunity at the New York Department of State. I love hearing your thoughts and reading all the comments and questions on what is important to our AAPI communities. And I hope that you definitely join us on Thursday, May 20th, where my colleague and Director of Policy and Research, Dr. Laura Gonzalez Murphy, will be sharing all things Department of State, including our Office for New Americans and our Division of Licensing. And I certainly hope you know about our Office for New Americans. If you do not, then we certainly have a lot of work to do, but we certainly focus in all of the communities and ensuring that access to services in New York State are readily available and funding community partners to help us deliver what is needed. I've heard you tonight. Look forward to addressing any concerns and continuing to improve on everything we do to best serve all New Yorkers. The work never ends, but we certainly want to make sure that we are listening to those that are seeking that we serve them in the way that they need to be served. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Willin Chick, the Director of the Office of Risk Management at the Department of Taxation and Finance, and a member of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee here at Tax. Our steering committee includes executives in our major bureaus at Tax, including our processing and taxpayer services, civil enforcement, human resources and audit, and our Council on Diversity and Equity. I'm thrilled to be here with you and my fellow colleagues this evening. Thank you so much for joining us and listening to panel speakers. Thank you, our panel speakers here tonight discussing very important issues that continue to affect Asian Americans today. As my colleagues have said, next week we're going to have a series of sessions, and I hope that you will join me next week to hear about the services and the support that the State Tax Department provides to the AAPI community. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Benjamin Pomerantz. I'm with the New York State Division of Veteran Services, and it is truly an honor to be with you all tonight. Our agency is New York's advocacy agency for all of the veterans, members of the military, and their family who call New York State their home, including the more than 12,000 veterans who identify as AAPI who reside in New York State. We look forward to speaking with you next week on May 19th and talking to you about our work representing veterans and their families in claims and appeals for benefits, programs, and services, from compensation to healthcare to employment preferences to tax exemptions and everything else imaginable in between. Thank you so much, and looking forward to more conversation next week.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Lydia Ashley Solar. I'm an investigator with the New York State Police. I've been with the New York State Police for 15 years, and the last couple of years assigned to the Bureau of Criminal Investigations Training Unit here at the State Police Academy, where we train and specialty investigators in specialty units, including crisis negotiation, undercover school, criminal interdiction, electronic surveillance, crime scene response, and hate crimes. So next Tuesday, what I'll discuss in our forum is the hate crimes training that we disseminate to our members throughout the state. We'll talk about who's trained in hate crimes investigations in our agency. We'll talk about what New York State allows us to do with hate crimes charges when it comes to the penal law. And we'll also discuss the strategies that we provide our members when they are investigating hate crimes. So I look forward to our meeting next Tuesday. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Diane Henk, and I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Diversity Officer for the State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. For those of you who aren't familiar with what we do, we are the agency that authorizes services for almost 140,000 New Yorkers who have intellectual or developmental disabilities. Those can include cerebral palsy, epilepsy, autism, neurological impairments, and other things that affect across the board people in New York State and around the country. It is not distinguished by any particular population. One of our goals, however, is to make sure that we provide an equitable system of services for all New Yorkers. And so we're very committed to this work and very happy to be part of this event tonight. We'll be speaking on Monday at lunchtime, where we'll talk about accessing services and how you can actually find out more, because a lot of times families who have children with developmental disabilities don't know that there are services available for them that they can access through our front door. So we look forward to some questions for you on Monday. Thank you.
John, I believe your audio is off, John. John, your audio is off. We're going to move to Christine.
Hi, sorry about that, John. Hi, I'm Christine Sadowski. I'm the Director for External Affairs at the Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. And on behalf of Kelly Owens, our Executive Director, who unfortunately couldn't be here because she's actually on vacation for the first time since COVID. So hope all of you get that as well. But I just want to thank you so much for being willing to spend your time this way. And we really look forward to telling you more about some really significant work we're doing at OPDV to ensure the cultural responsiveness and relevance of service delivery for domestic and sexual violence around New York State. We've been able to make a pretty significant commitment to that and are really looking forward to getting as much input as we can in the coming months to make sure that we are sure to serve all survivors throughout New York State, regardless of what kind of population or experience or community that you come from. And I think this will be an important avenue for us to get some of that information. So please join us again on Tuesday to hear more about that. Thank you.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Alana Martin. I'm Deputy Director and Counsel with the Council on Children and Families, and tonight representing both the Council on Children and Families and also the New York State Office of Children and Family Services. On behalf of OCFS, I want to talk a little bit about prevention work that we do with families that is embodied in our Healthy Families New York program, where we serve a significant number of Asian American families. I also want to talk a little bit about the Council on Children and Families has parenting posters that are in multiple languages. We have a Talking is Teaching media campaign that may have been seen that encourages early learning and development through talking. All of the work that's embedded in the child and family work that we do is culturally and linguistically competent, and we focus on family-centered strategies to best support families and children. And we're talking on Friday afternoon, and I look forward to continued conversation, and thank you so much.
And I'm Matt Knudsen, the Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the New York State Office of Mental Health. Our agency provides, funds, and licenses mental health services across New York State. Our specific role is to reduce disparities in access, quality, and treatment outcomes for marginalized populations, including AAPI New Yorkers. One important point that I want to make is that there is a distinct psychological impact and a mental health impact of racism and discrimination. And we're working extremely hard to ensure that all populations in New York State understand how to access these valuable services. Many times this means ensuring that information about how to access services is linguistically available, and also that services provided are done in a way that overcome language access barriers. Tune in on Friday, and we'll provide more information about the work that we do and the work that we're doing to ensure that people in the AAPI community have access to these services.
Hi, I'm Tom Keenan, Assistant Director of the Bureau of Refugee Services within the New York State Office of Temporary Disability Assistance. On behalf of Commissioner Michael Hine, I'd like to first express that OTDA stands in solidarity with the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities throughout New York. Many of you know that, in short, OTDA is a state agency that administers the employment and income support programs to New York's most needy and vulnerable. So I hope you can join us next Thursday, May 20th, for a lunchtime session where I'll present some more detailed information about the programs and services administered by OTDA and the Bureau of Refugee Services and how they may intersect with Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Cronin. I'm the director of the New York State Office of Victim Services. Thank you so much, Commissioner Smith, for inviting me to this town hall to participate and share information. OVS funds over 200 victim assistance programs throughout the state. Some programs are specifically designed to assist members of the AAPI community, but people can get assistance from any of our funded programs. We also provide financial compensation for victims of crime, and that also includes victims who have suffered from a hate crime. So join us next week when we talk more specifically about what sort of crimes would make a person eligible for victim compensation and how they can get assistance through our website or through our funded programs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you to all of my colleagues in state government for sharing about what your agencies do. I think one thing that should be clear is that there is a wealth of resources available, not just to the AAPI community, but to all New Yorkers. And we hope, but we particularly hope that during AAPI Heritage Month, that members of the AAPI community will take advantage of the sessions next week that you heard a bit about to learn more about those services and how you can take advantage of them. And I will say, having had the privilege of working with all of the agencies you just heard and knowing and working with most of the people who just spoke, you will find no better crop of public servants. And so I know that the events next week will be dynamic and informative and just all around great sessions. And we do hope that you will join us for those. I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. I want to give a special thanks to President Ng, Commissioner Fan, and President Quiniones for their insightful commentary and for their leadership. I want to thank again my colleagues in state government. I want to thank all of you for taking time to honor AAPI Heritage Month. I do want to remind all of you that we here at the New York State Division of Human Rights are a resource in case there are any issues of discrimination, bias, or harassment. And we would encourage anyone who has any questions or concerns, and certainly if you've been a victim of any of that conduct, to please contact us. And you can learn more about that by going to our website, dhr.ny.gov. I want to thank all of you again. I hope you have an enjoyable and safe AAPI Heritage Month. I hope to see many of you again next week. And thank you again. Have a great, safe, healthy evening. Thank you. Take care.